The rain hammered relentlessly against the floor-to-ceiling windows of our shared downtown loft, blurring the glittering city skyline into a wash of neon streaks and casting long, moody shadows across the kitchen island. For 3 years, we had lived under the strict, ironclad terms of a platonic roommate pact. Split the rent down the middle, never touch each other's groceries, and absolutely, under no circumstances, let the late-night kitchen talks cross the boundary into dangerous territory. Tonight was supposed to be the clean break, the civilized finale to an era. Her bags were zipped and waiting by the elevator bank, and a corporate relocation package was fly her out to Chicago by morning. I stood by the stove pretending to focus entirely on brewing a pot of black coffee, while she paced the hardwood floor in her damp trench coat, the tension between us thick enough to suffocate a fire. We had spent the last week politely avoiding eye contact, terrified that a single lingering glance would unravel the fragile web of lies we had constructed to protect our friendship. Yet, as the digital clock on the microwave blinked midnight and the freight elevator chimed to signal her ride was downstairs, the hollow reality of what I was about to lose hit me like a physical blow. She stopped pacing, turned slowly to face me, and whispered that she couldn't leave without clearing the air about the night it all went wrong. The night of our mutual friend's wedding 6 months ago, when we sheltered from a sudden storm under a forgotten gazebo and almost crossed a line we swore we never would. Long before the suitcases appeared in the hallway, our dynamic had been defined by a precarious balance of humor and restraint, two parallel lines running agonizingly close together without ever quite intersecting. I remembered every detail of that rainy night at the wedding, the way the damp wind had chilled the air, and how she had pressed close to my side under the canvas shelter, her laughter cutting to the roar of the thunder. In that secluded space, away from the noise of the ballroom, the world had shrunk down to just the two of us, and for one reckless second, I had looked at the curve of her lips and wondered what it would feel like to surrender to the pull I felt every single day. But we had pulled back, retreating behind the safety of our established boundaries, burying the undeniable chemistry beneath polite smiles and morning coffee routines. Now, with the final hours ticking away before her departure, the illusion of safety had completely vanished, leaving behind the raw, terrifying truth that we had both been playing a part in a play neither of us actually wanted to star in. The silence stretched between us, heavy and electric, broken only by the steady drumbeat of the rain against the glass and the low, mechanical hum of the refrigerator. Every memory of our shared apartment, the burnt pancakes on Sunday mornings, the late-night movie debates on the worn-out velvet couch, the silent understanding during our respective stressful weeks, flashed through my mind like a reel of film playing at double speed. She stood there near the kitchen island, her hands nervously clutching the hem of her trench coat, her eyes searching my face for any sign of resistance, any hint that I wanted her to stay just as badly as she secretly wanted to be asked. The corporate job in Chicago was real, the lease agreement was signed, and the moving company was already scheduled to clear out the remaining furniture by noon tomorrow. But none of that mattered anymore, because the emotional dam we had built over 36 months was finally cracking under pressure of unsaid words. Before I could find a voice to stop her, she took a sharp, breathless step forward, closing the distance of the kitchen floor with a frantic urgency that completely shattered our 3-year-old defense mechanism. The corporate relocation, the plane tickets, the carefully packed suitcases downstairs. Everything suddenly evaporated into the background as she confessed that she hadn't slept a single full night in 6 months, not because of the new job, but because every apartment she looked at downtown didn't have me in it. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped bird, and before logic could intervene, my hands reached out, catching her by the waist and pulling her flush against my chest as the rain lashed violently against the glass. The kiss wasn't sweet or tentative. It was desperate, hungry, and heavy with months of suppressed longing, a chaotic collision of everything we had tried so hard to bury beneath chore charts and polite hallway greetings. Her fingers tangled fiercely into the damp fabric of my shirt, pulling me down as if she were drowning, and I was the only air left in the room, completely obliterating the boundary between roommates and lovers in a single, breathless second. The world outside ceased to exist. The city lights blurred into meaningless streaks of color, and the ticking clock on the wall lost its authority over us. Every hesitation, every late-night glance across the living room, and every unspoken confession from the past 3 years poured into that single, consuming embrace. I felt her breath hitch against my lips as my hand slid from her waist up to cradle the back of her head, pulling her closer still, refusing to let her slip away into the phantom future she had planned for herself in another city. She kissed me back with an equal, fierce intensity, her hands gripping my shoulders as if anchoring herself to the only real thing in a world that was suddenly shifting beneath our feet. The air in the kitchen grew warm, thick with the scent of rain, coffee, and the undeniable chemistry we had denied for so long. When we finally broke apart, gasping for breath with flushed faces and wide, disbelieving eyes, our foreheads pressed together, chests heaving in the dim kitchen light, the sheer absurdity of our 3-year pact hung in the air between us like a bad joke. We stood there suspended in the wreckage of our carefully planned goodbyes, realizing with sudden, blinding clarity that letting each other go was the one thing neither of us was actually capable of surviving. The emotional floodgates were wide open now, sweeping away every rule, every boundary, and every excuse we had ever manufactured to keep our feelings hidden in the shadows. "If you get on that elevator tonight," I murmured against her lips, my thumb gently tracing the curve of her jawline while the city lights flickered outside, "I am calling the landlord tomorrow morning and renting out your room to a total stranger just to spite you." She let out a sudden, wet laugh that turned into a half-sob, her hands sliding up to cup my face as a brilliant, defiant smile broke through her tears. "You wouldn't dare," she whispered fiercely, rising onto her tiptoes to kiss me again, softer this time, filled with a terrifying and beautiful certainty. "Besides, my name is still on the lease for another 6 months, and I think we need to renegotiate the terms of our roommate agreement." The weight of the tension dissolved into quiet space between us, replaced by a giddy, disorienting relief that felt entirely surreal after years of emotional imprisonment. We didn't talk about Chicago, we didn't talk about the packing boxes downstairs, and we certainly didn't talk about the professional timelines that had seemed so absolute only an hour ago. Instead, we stood there in the center of the kitchen, wrapped in each other's arms, letting the reality of our new normal sink in slowly through the quiet hum of the night. She rested her head against my chest, listening to the steady, accelerated rhythm of my heart, while my fingers traced gentle patterns through her damp hair. It was a strange, beautiful feeling, knowing that the person you had spent years living alongside as a stranger was actually the one person you couldn't imagine your life without. The clock on the microwave ticked past midnight, officially marking the start of a brand new day. But for the first time in 3 years, the future didn't feel like a terrifying unknown. It felt like an open road, waiting for us to figure out together, one messy, imperfect step at a time. We both knew the logistical nightmare waiting for us in the morning, canceling plane tickets, explaining things to human resources, dealing with moving contracts. But standing here in the dim kitchen light, none of those headaches mattered in the slightest. The only thing that mattered was that the door hadn't closed, the suitcases downstairs were going to be brought back up, and our roommate agreement was officially, permanently obsolete. The storm outside eventually blew itself out, leaving behind a pristine, rain-washed city skyline and an apartment that suddenly felt less like a transit station and more like an actual home. We abandoned our packed suitcases in the hallway, dragging our comforter out onto the living room floor and sitting cross-legged amidst a scattered mess of travel brochures and discarded raincoats. She curled up entirely against my side, her bare feet tucked under my legs, absently tracing the collarbone of my shirt while we laughed about how terribly we had managed our secret crush for 36 months. It wasn't a clean, perfectly planned romance born out of a romantic comedy script. It was messy, impulsive, and born out of 2 stubborn people who almost let fear steal the best thing in their lives. As the first pale rays of dawn began to paint the eastern sky in shades of amber and soft rose, I looked down at her sleeping peacefully against my shoulder and realized that some rules aren't meant to be followed. They're meant to be broken right at the edge of midnight. The transition from roommates to partners wasn't going to be without its quirks. We still had to figure out who was going to take out the trash, how we were going to split the grocery bills now that sharing meals took on an entirely different meaning, and what excuse we were going to give our landlords. But looking at the scattered moving boxes pushed carelessly against the far wall, I knew we could handle whatever logistical chaos came our way. The silence of the apartment was no longer heavy or suffocating. It was warm, breathing, and filled with the quiet promise that tomorrow we were finally facing together. She shifted slightly in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible before pressing closer against me, her hand tightening around mine as if making sure I wouldn't vanish when the sun came up. I pulled the comforter higher over our shoulders, watching the morning light chase away the last lingering shadows from the corners of the room. It was funny how life worked. You could spend years looking for grand adventures and epic romances across the world, only to find that the greatest story of your life was sitting right across the kitchen island, eating burnt toast, waiting for you to be brave enough to change the rules.